Welcome back to the Make Time for Success podcast. This is episode number 222. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming back my friend and colleague, Amy Lang, to the podcast. She is a certified master health coach, respected author of the book Thoughts Are Habits Too, and a brain health licensed trainer. In this wonderful episode, Amy shares with us her expertise on optimizing brain health for women experiencing the transition of menopause. Her focus has been on empowering women to boost their brain power, guard against the risk of Alzheimer's, and maintain sharp cognitive function throughout the later years in life. In our discussion, she shares many profound insights and practical strategies for you to develop effective habits, ensure your restful sleep, and nurture your self-care, all crucial elements in supporting your brain health. She shares a lot about her personal journey, and she will help you to get a strong foundation for enhancing your well-being and preserving your vitality. You don't want to miss this compelling episode, so let's go listen to it. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Lee, and I'm a psychologist and a procrastination coach. I've helped thousands of people move past procrastination and overwhelm so they could begin working to their potential. In this podcast, you're going to learn powerful strategies for getting your mind, body, and energy to work together so that you can focus on what's really important and accomplish the goals you want to achieve. When you start living within your full power, you're going to see how being productive can be easy and how you can create success on demand. Welcome to the Make Time for Success podcast. Hi, everyone. Amy Lang and I have been doing a little bit of laughter before we pressed record. So we're already on a track to delivering a really fun, really informative episode. I want to welcome Amy back to the show. Amy Lang is a certified master health coach who focuses and specializes on optimizing brain health. I can't wait to ask her so many different questions. We're going to have a great conversation, and you're going to end up feeling like you have a lot better a handle on sleep, what goes into sleep, what you need to do with your sleep patterns. Welcome back to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited for this episode.
Yes. Me too. Amy has already been on the show, and she's been just such a wonderful friend and colleague to me over the years. And over the years, I've really relied on her for her brain. And I think I mentioned that in the first episode. She is a font of wisdom, knows the current research, knows how to describe the current research in a way that is understandable to people who are not necessarily research hounds or maybe necessarily even curious about these topics. And I know more recently, she's been deeply interested in helping people with their sleep habits. So we've decided that's going to be the focus of today's episode. But before we get into the nitty gritty about sleep, I wanted to ask Amy what caused her, or what was the background? What is the origin story of how you became a habits expert?
Probably from owning the health club. So I was the owner of Pacific Heights Health Club for 15 plus years. That's in San Francisco. And you can imagine for a health club how many people joined because they wanted to lose weight or get in shape. That's like the two big reasons. And in terms of weight loss, so often we would offer, say, a 6-week challenge. And so people like projects, they beginning, middle, end, right? And there's a flawed reasoning with weight loss where they're like, okay, I want to lose the weight first and then figure out how to keep it off. And when I finally got them into the club and I could have a real conversation with them, not all the marketing stuff, but literally have a conversation with them, I was like, what if we thought about movement like you think about brushing your teeth? Because so often, like with the 6-week challenge during the summertime, people would be like, well, can I extend it a week? Because we're going to be on vacation. And I was like, are you going to brush your teeth while you're on this cruise or wherever you're going? Okay, how about if we're moving? It's just moving maybe a little differently. So it was really like less about dieting short term, let me overhaul my life, and much more about how do we work with our brain and body and do things. And the thing about habits, they conserve energy, which works with your brain. And when you get those habits dialed in, those healthy habits that you want, then you're automating what's important. You have a system to make sure that it happens, as opposed to having to spend a lot of conscious energy trying to make it happen.
Okay, that's a great explanation. Thank you for that. But does being a gym owner make you understand habits? Like, how did you understand that that was the right way to think about habits?
I think it's a lot of it comes from reading. Like I read The Power of Habit. I read Compound Effect. I read Tiny Habit, like Atomic Habits. I think everyone's read that one at this point. I think it was really just the whole, when I really started applying it to my own life, it became very clear, like, oh, this makes much more sense. And the more I understood the science behind it too, the more it was kind of really working with my brain and body as opposed to against it, as opposed to creating states of scarcity or lack where it's, and then learning sort of all the mistakes that we tend to make in trying to achieve our goals, right? Even getting so attached to certain outcomes that are ones that we really don't have any control over. Whereas we can control literally what we choose to do today. That's the only place we actually can exert control, really. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow's not promised. We only have this moment, really.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. So now you are demonstrating and communicating with a very calm and patient and loving tone. Have you always had that tone? And I'm kind of maybe developing a lead-in question to what have you been like with your own self in terms of self-regulation, keeping the habits, being kind and patient with yourself? What is your own backstory, if you don't mind sharing that?
Ah, well, so when I had the health club, one of the trainers, actually, I talk about him in my book, shameless plug, Thoughts Are Habits too. He was my trainer there, and he was actually getting certified as a life coach. And it was really interesting because in a conversation I had with him, he was like, your superpower is kindness. So I think in terms of how I communicate, this is just kind of the way I am, kind of my being. I probably listen more now than when I was younger. I was very talkative when I was younger. And as far as the conversations that I have, the self-talk, if you will, I think I was probably, when I was younger, I was much harder on myself. I still catch myself, right? And one of the things that I teach people that I try to practice myself as much as possible is this 4-step reframing method. I call it practicing TLC, where it's becoming aware of the thought. And when I say that, practices like meditation really help with that, where you can literally sort of be that neutral observer of your thoughts. So once you become aware of them, I say shine a light on them, because our thoughts, especially that self-talk, the automatic negative thoughts, they are fleeting. It's like a dream. And if you don't capture it, it's very easy to lose it. So journaling is really helpful. And I actually think also when we write, we're using different parts of our brain. So we end up in a different place than if we just let it bounce around in our head. When we write, we create a little distance. We can actually observe a little better. And yes, so you really get to see what it is that you're thinking. Even saying it out loud versus letting it go around in your head makes a difference, right? So once you become aware of the thought, then let's challenge the premise of it. And I usually use 4 questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it helpful? I know Byron Katie has a different set of 4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Daniel Amen has kind of built on that.
Yes.
But I love those 4 because if you cannot answer yes to all 4 of those questions, then this is an opportunity to reframe it in a way that better serves, right? So that we're literally aligning the thought that we want with the emotion that it generates. And we talked about energy stuff, right? Like that emotion that creates the energy that propels you in a particular direction so that you're taking action. When we get those all aligned, then things become easy. I'm always like, how do we make it easy? Like this podcast, I'm excited. I'm like, we're going to have fun. I'm always having fun when I talk to you. So, and you're so good at asking questions. That's one of the things that I'm like, how do I get better at asking questions?
Well, Amy thank you for that. And I always have fun with you. And Amy is an optimizer, I would say. Her brain is on the lookout for ways to make things easier, make things smoother, have things make more sense, which I love. I love that. And I try to be like that too. I don't think I'm naturally as gifted in that category as Amy is, but I appreciate the way her mind works, like the gears are turning to figure out the issue. So it sounds like you've always had a way to kind of work through your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, and your energy. Does that make sense?
I don't think I always did. So when I was in my early 30s, I actually went to counseling. So for like 3 years. And one of the things that I learned that I share with folks is the learning cycle. Lots of people know it as like your thoughts drive your emotions, which drive your actions, which lead to whatever outcome, right? So I break it down further where I really talk about we have a particular situation. We use our senses to take in what's happening. And that, along with the thoughts we have, our beliefs, we create meaning from it. There's an interpretation. And it's that interpretation that drives the emotions that we have. And so when you think about it that way, then it's like all the choices that you have, the ones you're going to make are going to align with that emotion, right? So it doesn't mean that all the other, like a lot of times we get into this all or nothing thinking. We see a binary choice when there's actually a whole continuum of choices. But again, I go back to it depends on how you're looking at it. Can you even see that choice exists? And then when you align with it, you get a particular response. That response generates outcomes. That outcome ultimately is evidence for your brain. And we have a confirmation bias, right? We want to be right. Our brain's always looking for like, yes, I solved the problem correctly. And so we look for evidence. So that's I'm always like, if we make it easy, then we fuel ourselves, right? With evidence that, oh, this is working. This is working. I can do this. I'm the little engine that could.
Yes. Yes.
So I learned that in counseling. That was the game changer for me when I understood, oh, it's my interpretation, that I'm making it mean something. And I have the ability to manage that. So I did not always have that. That was something that I learned.
All right. Thank you for teaching us all that. And I feel as old as I am at the moment that I feel like I'm constantly learning different versions of that thoughts lead to emotions, lead to actions, lead to results scenario. And that we're always learning about possibilities and we're always learning about shadow parts of ourselves. We're learning different ways that we can run ourselves into problems and out of alignment. And I just love learning about the same things that Amy loves to learn about as well. But I also appreciate Amy disclosing about the therapy piece, because that's also such a valid and beautiful way to learn about how you're functioning, how you're treating yourself, how your habits are going, and to get somebody else's companionship and viewpoint on what's going on with you. For those of you who are listening who have never been in therapy, it can be such a mind and body opening experience where you are able to explore in a zone of safety parts of you that may never have gotten daylight or been seen without the help of a professional and a private space and some time dedicated to that process. And of course, I've been through years of therapy myself, many, many years of therapy. All right, Amy. So you have given us the basic understanding of how habits go and how our thoughts and feelings and behaviors are connected to each other. And we've talked about how alignment really helps to get us going in the right direction, helps us to save energy and time. But what happens? It makes me think about people who are thinking, I'm going to stick with my habit, and then they don't, right? And that's been every one of us, you and I, and everyone who's listening. So I just want to get your sense of what's going on when you have a plan. Cognitively, you've designed what you think is a reasonable, doable plan. And then lo and behold, you're not going to the gym. You're not eating the foods that you decided were good for your body type and your particular stage in life. Can you describe just any thoughts that you have about when we are not sticking with our plans?
Well, we are creatures of habit. Like if you were, I was thinking about doing like a habit inventory right now of from the moment you wake up, like what are the things that you do where it takes minimal thought, minimal energy. I get up, I go to the bathroom. I always exit the bed from a certain side. Go to the bathroom, brush my teeth. Right there are things that I do that I don't have to think about. Some of it is nature calling, right? But brushing my teeth isn't, but it's automatic. So brush my teeth with my right hand because I'm right-handed, right? So it would be interesting to do an inventory of all the things that we do automatically. So one of the things I talk about with brain health is our brain is only 2% of our body weight, but it actually uses like 20% of the energy. So it's an energy hog. Your brain has like three big priorities. Number one, to keep us safe. Number two, to conserve energy. And number three, to seek pleasure, right? Rewards. And so when we don't do the thing that we were planning, I think we've just defaulted to some other habit.
Mm-hmm.
We're just on autopilot at that point. That's most of the time. And there are other times where maybe you're making a choice. Like, am I going to go work out today or not? And even there, that would be an opportunity when you become aware of it. It goes back to that whole, a lot of times, like you're 3 steps away from it already. And then you're like, oh, like, why am I doing this again? In that moment, while it's still a little fresh, that would be a great opportunity to journal. So there's this, as I described that 4-step process, there was an assumption there that you became aware of the thought before things went sideways, right? It can go sideways. That's fine. You become aware of it. At that point, you can always kind of go back. Okay, how did I get myself here? What were the thoughts? What were the feelings that led me to do this instead, right? Just basically stay in my comfort zone. So ultimately, it's still about our brain saying, I've seen this before. I know this pattern. This is what I do. This solves the problem. I don't feel like it. Well, why don't I feel like it? How am I thinking about it that leads me to say, I don't feel like it? Because I think that's probably like when you verbalize what it is, that's probably the thought. I don't feel like it. Okay. What thought precedes I don't feel like it?
Mm-hmm. I love these thoughts. I particularly like the fact that you're probably defaulting to an old habit, one that you've been using, because that explains a lot, right? Because we're always, like you said, throughout the day using habits. And so if things are not going the way you are planning for, it's likely you're doing some other habit that maybe makes you feel more comfortable in the moment. And maybe you got away from your plan. And we can take a look at that and you can be mindful about it. You can journal about it. You can do any sort of investigation you want. All right. So now I think this is a perfect juncture to hop over to the sleep conversation because we all have sleep habits. We all have the requirement of sleep every day. And we all have such widely differing behaviors and routines and attitudes about sleep. And sometimes those behaviors, attitudes, and routines change day by day. And I'm just excited to hear what you've learned and found and implemented for yourself and for your clients. I am bringing up this topic because sleep hygiene and getting good enough sleep is such a priority problem. I will say that. I will call that a priority problem, meaning it is high on the list of problems that clients discuss with me and with other group members in our coaching groups. And it just keeps circling back, right? No matter how many times we can look at it, somebody's going to have a struggle with sleep. And I understand that because I am not someone who sleeps perfectly myself. I have my ideas of what perfect sleep would look like for me. And sometimes I aim for that. Sometimes I don't. So I just want to get your basic take on sleep for women in midlife and what are some of the complications of getting that really good, solid sleep consistently for women in midlife.
Okay. Well, actually, just a week or so ago, I presented to a group of moms. It's the Young Men's Service League. So all the moms there had boys in high school, so grades 9 through 12. And when you look at what age they were, I started the presentation asking 3 questions. Who here is having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or falling back to sleep? And those are 3 different things. And I'd say 3/4 of that room raised their hand. And then I asked, okay, how many of you are experiencing brain fog? And I probably got half the room. And then I asked, who here has had frozen shoulder? And I got 2/3 of the room. So I'm raising this because you said midlife. These are really women, probably perimenopausal, that are experiencing symptoms, right, of menopause, of really sort of the decrease in estrogen. And estrogen is not just a sex hormone. I mean, I think we understand that now. It's not just about reproduction. It is this master regulator, especially in women's brains. So when we have hot flashes and stuff like that, right, that's the hypothalamus trying to figure out how do I regulate temperature because my estrogen's not there anymore. So sleep disturbances are very common for women going through menopause, the menopause transition. So both before and after, right? So menopause actually represents when we are officially out of eggs. I don't think there's actually a way to measure it. I think it's really literally these days, there's medical menopause, like if you had a hysterectomy, right? And your ovaries were removed along with that. But otherwise, it's usually 1 year after your last period is you're considered, okay, menopause. So that's a day. And then everything else is either peri or post. It's very sort of fuzzy definition from my perspective in that sense. But so when we talk about sleep, recognize that it is oftentimes estrogen. Like I was up until I went through like menopause, I was a good sleeper. I didn't have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, falling back to sleep. I usually didn't wake up, so there was no falling back to sleep. And I am now, full transparency, I am on hormone replacement therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that has helped. But there's lots of other things that we can do. So stress, chronic stress is a big one. I actually sat down before because I knew we were going to have this conversation. I was thinking about like, what are common mistakes that people make when it comes to sleep? And one of those mistakes that I had listed, it was actually number 5. So, but I'll just reverse the order here. So number 5, I was saying, was lying in bed, worrying and ruminating, especially if you're lying in bed for like 20 or more minutes. So if you catch yourself doing that, right, where you've been lying, even if it's just thoughts bouncing around, maybe you're not worrying, right? Get out of bed. Like we want the association with our bed to be sleeping, not a battleground. And I think if you're lying in bed 30, 40 minutes, like you're struggling to fall asleep, what are you thinking about when you look at your bed? Like, oh, what am I going to do? How long is it going to take tonight? That's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So try even going to if you have another place to sleep, another bedroom, you could try that. So sometimes, like if you're waking up in the middle of the night, it could be that you're too warm. So one of the things that we need is our body to cool, to stay asleep. So if you're sleeping next to someone who's a really warm sleeper, that might be adding to the problem, in addition to whatever you're going through yourself. So if you're lying in bed for a long time, I would say get up. Get up. You can do something else. I would try to steer you away from looking at a screen, though. Like if you want to read a book, listen to a podcast might be good. Something that allows you, even like a progressive muscle relaxation meditation would be good. I actually, if folks want to, I have one, I recorded one. So if they would like to go to moxie-club.com/PMR, lowercase, for progressive muscle relaxation, that's an option for them. But the idea here is to get your mind to quiet, to focus on one thing, and to relax your body. So if you're stressed, if your brain, if you're worrying about something, you're triggering a stress response. How are you going to fall asleep if your brain thinks there's a threat of some kind? So that's why we really want to get our parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. So anything we can do to get into that mode will help. So,
which is the stress less, or the calmer part of our calming a part of our nervous system.
Right. Versus the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the activating kind. Absolutely.
With the cortisol and everything else that we've heard about. So lying in bed, I would say alcohol consumption. I don't drink alcohol, but a lot of my clients, if you look at like social media, a lot of folks are talking about how, especially with perimenopause, postmenopause, that alcohol is just not a good mix, right? It's not getting metabolized the same way or as well. And so alcohol, when you look at sleep, is more of a sedative. So sedation is not the same thing as sleep. Now, if you're using alcohol to help you fall asleep, I think what's really important to understand is alcohol will fragment your sleep, meaning you're much more likely then to wake up. And it also disrupts REM sleep, which is your dream sleep. So you need REM sleep for things like memory consolidation. This helps with learning. So it's that idea of like, if you sleep on it and you get a good night's sleep, then stuff that was in short-term memory, right, makes its way into long-term. And it's almost like there's an indexing system that's occurring. All these connections are being made too. So yeah, alcohol can really disrupt that whole process. And it dehydrates you as well. So, which for your brain is not a good thing. Another common mistake, you talked about the attitude around sleep, where,
Yes.
I mean, when I was growing up, it was well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. You hear a lot of that. There's that Midwest, I grew up in Michigan, the Midwest work ethic. I watched my parents, who I don't think they got enough sleep, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
My parents didn't retire until they were 76 years old. And my dad talks about how they got up at 6:30, right? And I know I saw them up at around like 11:30 or 12 o'clock. So they weren't even giving themselves the opportunity to get 8 hours of sleep. And so usually it's somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. Like, it depends on the person. But that's why you often hear 8, I think it's just the average, right? But I don't think my mom was getting 7 hours of sleep a night. So my mom has Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed when she was 78. So they retired in 76, 78, she got diagnosed. And yeah, I think between the chronic stress and sleep, she grew up in Taiwan. I know she had or has hepatitis B, chronic hep B. She had malaria when she was little, right? So there's like new research that's talking about infections like COVID-19, herpes zoster, that are potentially going to be added as risk factors for dementia. So yeah, we want to, these are, my brain is these days all focused on how do we optimize our brain health, and sleep is one of those things. So sleep, I want to put a plug in here. When we get deep sleep, our lymphatic system, which is like the janitorial service, right? During the day, we naturally produce amyloid and tau. These are proteins that are just naturally occurring. It's not like something's gone wrong. When they accumulate and become plaques and tangles, that's where we get into trouble. That's when there's like an inflammatory response that kicks in as well. But deep sleep helps to clear those proteins before they become an issue. Think about it as like when they're not all clumped together, when they're not turning into plaque. It's like when you brush your teeth and floss, right? We want to avoid the buildup. So that's why deep sleep is so important. Deep sleep happens more in the first half of the night versus the second half. So we've talked about this before, where when you look at the sleep wake or the sleep cycle, and how I don't think I want to go through all of that in this episode, but you can listen to some of my episodes where I go through it. But ultimately, it's that, during, let's say, an 8-hour sleep, more deep sleep happens in the first 4 hours. So if you short your sleep, let's say you normally go to bed at 11, get up at 7. That means the first 4 hours happen between 11 and 3. Second half is between 3 and 7. If you were to short your sleep, and I'm looking at my clock, if you got up at, say, 5 a.m. one morning, you're going to lose out on REM sleep. That seems to make sense. What if we reversed it? What if you went to bed at 2 in the morning and got up at 7? You would actually be losing out on deep sleep. So your body naturally does the deep sleep in that first part. Like, there's a circadian rhythm thing that's going on. So it's not just like, oh, I'm just starting and I'm always going to get deep sleep and lose out on REM sleep. That's not how it works. So, okay, so I talked about lying in bed. I talked about alcohol consumption. So sleeping in on the weekends. There's this idea of, oh, I accumulated sleep debt. Can I make up for it? Our bodies, we're creatures of habit. Our bodies crave that routine. If you have a pet. I have a dog, Christine. Like, we know they love routine. Our body is the same way. So if you can, I would say really endeavor to go to bed and get up at the same time every day. Sleeping in on the weekends, oftentimes, if you sleep in, then your sleep drive has been affected. So that means you won't want to go to bed as early, right? If you get up at 10 or 11, you watch teenagers. If you get up at like 10 or 11 versus when you normally get up at, say, 6 or 7, what's going to happen at nighttime, right? So on the weekends, if you push it out and then Sunday night, now you can't go to sleep, but you got to get up early, that doesn't really work. So I would say just endeavor to try to keep that the same. Late night snacking is a big one. I know in the weight loss world, people used to always have this rule like, to not eat after 7 o'clock or whatever. I think part of it is just, it depends on what time you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea so late night snacking, think about what people are often eating when they're snacking too. So if you're eating stuff that's high in sugar, refined carbs, so not necessarily just sugar, but just simple carbohydrates to begin with. What are you doing to your insulin levels? Like if you want to lose weight, insulin is not your friend in the sense of getting your body to burn fat. It's not going to happen. So from a hormone perspective, it's not going to happen. I won't get into all the details in this since we're talking about sleep. So if you're eating those really simple carbs, you're basically probably increasing your heart rate. You're right. There's all this kind of stuff that's happening because give a kid a bunch of sugar, watch them bounce off the walls. We're just adults, so we don't bounce necessarily, but it's still happening within us. And when it comes to brain health, type 2 diabetes and obesity are big risk factors. It's interesting that I came from that fitness, wellness, trying to lose weight world. I wanted to pivot to brain health, and I come like full circle, like, it's all connected. Metabolic health, your cardiovascular health, and your brain health are all interconnected. So if you take care of your metabolic health, you're helping the rest too.
Yeah. I was doing, just a side note, I was doing a TikTok yesterday, very side note, but I realized with the message I was delivering in that TikTok that I agree, everything is connected. So whatever you're doing to take care of your health is also pinging back and assisting your emotional health and how you communicate with other people and how you face new challenges and then how you sleep at night. So as you were going through the list of mistakes that people make when it comes to getting those great hours of sleep and getting the good deep sleep and REM sleep, I said, this is just regular human behavior. But it also made me think, wow, if we all got consistently good, healthy sleep, we would probably be much more likely to be able to cut down on some of these mistakes just naturally. We wouldn't feel as much like snacking in the middle of the night because we'd be properly sleeping, and we wouldn't feel like our hunger eating issues and patterns were so chaotic. Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe that would lead to easier weight maintenance, and that might lead to a more stable mood. All these things are related. I think we know that intuitively, but then we decide, oh, you know what? I can skip tonight's sleep, or I can live on 5 hours. It's just one night. And every time I talk to Amy about sleep, I run to my bed. I just think, no plaque for me, no more, no more firing the janitorial staff in my brain. I am going to do better with this. And I want to thank you for just being so loving and kind with your explanations of what are the consequences and what are the easy shifts that you can do to just improve things even a little bit, that all of this matters and all of this is connected and all of it's really important.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, okay, so if we tie sleep and weight loss together, okay, so we're talking brain health as well. But when we say it's all connected, so I talked about metabolic health and cardiovascular health. What about like hormone balancing? So when you look at like the principles of optimizing brain health, so I have identified 5, okay, and there's kind of a hierarchy. So the top 2 are energy management and restoring balance. Okay. Or if you think about like Eastern and Western medicine and functional integrative medicine, we're talking about balance and harmony. So when we talk about energy management, there's a TED talk by Dr. Lisa Mosconi from, I think it was 2017. And she has the PET scan, so this brain imaging of a same woman pre and post menopause, and you get to see the energy metabolism, right? The energy usage activity, whatever you want to call it, in different parts of her brain. And you can see a significant drop before and after. And she said it actually represented like a 30% drop in metabolism. So women's brains are more vulnerable, I believe, when it comes to Alzheimer's. And I mean, the statistics right now are we've got about 7 million adults in the US living with Alzheimer's, of which 2/3 are women. We outnumber men 2 to 1. And at age 45, our lifetime risk of developing Alzheimer's for women is 1 in 5. So 20%. That's a big number. And if you have a family history, so my mom has Alzheimer's, her mom had Alzheimer's. So I haven't gotten genetic testing and stuff, although I'm seriously considering it. I think we need to start thinking about Alzheimer's the way we think about cancer, in that earlier detection is better. We have more options when we detect it early. The earlier we can, then the more we can actually, like lifestyle changes or interventions can make a bigger impact. So by the time, you look in a brain like my mom's brain at this point, there's probably so much irreversible damage. Even if we could get her to do be super diligent about all the things, and we can't because my dad's kind of gatekeeper for that. That's a whole nother issue. I think we could probably slow down the progression, but the damage is done. There's a lot of damage that's done. So the good news is when we're younger, there's this thing called neuroplasticity, right? There's this concept of cognitive reserve and brain reserve, where if you have this mindset of, I'm always going to be learning new things, then you're like, so one of the principles is use it or lose it. So brain is like a muscle, right? We want to keep using it. I think there's mental stimulation, learning new things, being socially active, right? The quality of your relationships matter. You're using different parts of your brain when you're interacting with people. So reading people, I started taking tennis lessons a few years ago. I love that. I'm outside, I'm moving my body, and it's always changing. Like how that other person, you play with different people, they have different patterns, all that stuff. So I think I'm probably helping my brain. I'm doing what I can to help my brain, is essentially what I'm saying. So I am doing my best to walk the talk. Does that mean I'm perfect? Absolutely not. And there are a lot of things I'm like, oh, okay, I need to focus on that, right? And yeah. So one of the other mistakes, just before I forget, or I don't want to forget, is scrolling on your phone, like TikTok or Instagram or whatever, before you go to bed, especially if you struggle to fall asleep. because you're basically like that light from the screen. You hear about blue light, right? That light from the screen is like tricking your brain into thinking that it's earlier in the day. So you're just kind of pushing out sleep. And that's why I say, like, listen to a podcast and, if you, as part of your bedtime routine, can like turn down the lights and things like that, that can often help. You talked about the chain, right? Where you were talking about depending on like, where do you want to intervene during the day to get that better sleep? Is it to go to bed earlier? Is it to not do the late night snacking? Is it like where can you break the chain, so to speak? Maybe one of the easiest things to do. So I talked about the mistakes. One of the things you could do is when you get up in the morning, can you go for a quick walk outside? That tells your brain like, oh, it's daytime. It's morning. Like, how do we help that sleep drive kind of kick in? And it will help you wake up too, right? Because you're walking, blood circulation, all that good stuff. I kind of lost my train of thought. Where did we want to go with your last question?
Well, I think you're doing fantastically because you're covering so many different areas that we could maybe just say, okay, I remember Amy said I should get out the door in the morning because that's going to help me at night. And I just think if our listeners take one or two, like one piece of wisdom, one activity that they can do, that could set off a whole new chain of attitudes and actual behaviors around not just sleep health, but overall health, right? The things that you were talking about that you're doing for your brain health, they're helping your life. They're helping your vitality, which is of course feeding back to your brain. This girl wants to live. This girl wants to stay relevant and alert and flexible. And I just think that's good at any age. And that is good advice for anybody, man or woman, menopause or not. And let's just spend the thinking time and the planning time and the life investment time into things like this, because we think so much about work. We think so much about being good people. That's all great. But we also have to feed back into our bodies because our bodies and brains are working so overtime to take care of us. We want to put in the sleep so that our bodies and brains can really work like the master machines that they are.
Absolutely. Ultimately, our brain is responsible for what we think, how we feel, what we say, what we do, right? Our personality, our memories, our intelligence,
Our choices, so
our
big.
judgment. Yeah. Yeah. Planning, all of that stuff. And so, like, a healthy brain gives you, like, I always talk about, we can't control outcomes, but we can create conditions. A garden is a really good analogy. Like, there are things we can't control, whether or not it, like if there's going to be a drought or whatever. I mean, if you have a house plant, right? Water it, fertilize it, talk to it, right? All of those things, we get to control those things. Those are our behaviors. And when we create those conditions, then we put ourselves in a position it's much more likely for us to get those outcomes that we're looking for. But ultimately, the control lies in what we can do today, right? I keep going back to the like, what you do today is what truly matters. So if we focus our attention on what we can control, and again, like we can't control the outcomes. I think one other thing when I'm talking to clients is we actually can't control what other people think, say, feel, or do either. We want to, why can't I get them, or this person makes me so mad or whatever. It's like, no, we don't have that power to make someone feel something. So even someone else, if you say like, oh, this person makes me so mad, I'm like, ultimately, it's still how you think about it and how you're interpreting it. I'm not saying you're not accurately, but just understand ultimately it's still your thoughts that are triggering that emotion.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, we have more control than we give ourselves credit for. But then, yeah, when we try to control what someone else is thinking, we really can't. I guess maybe unless you've been hypnotized or something, and then that's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. Different episode.
Otherwise, yeah, then it's like instead of trying to manipulate, I actually think it's developing the skill of clear, direct, authentic communication, where you're talking about healthy boundaries and all that stuff. That's where we want to go in terms of, again, like what you can control.
Okay, great.
Anyways, that's a whole nother thing.
I want to go back to the 5 principles of optimal brain health.
Okay.
I have energy management and I have restoring balance. I have a feeling you went through the other ones in conversation, but I just want to make sure our audience knows what are the 5 points for optimal brain health, if you don't mind going over those for us.
Sure. So number 1, yeah, we're talking about energy management. Number 2, restoring balance. Number 3 is addressing root causes. We didn't actually talk about that. But when you think about prevention, one of the things with our healthcare system is that we're very focused on treatments. So, okay, in our healthcare system, when we talk about prevention, we're talking Western allopathic medicine. There's primary prevention. So that would be preventing the disease from occurring. Now, if you have a strong immune system, that can help, right? That would be like what I think of as prevention. But vaccines are also a form of prevention, okay? And then secondary prevention is literally treating the disease. So think antibiotics for an infection, right? Anything where it's a cure, so to speak. And then tertiary prevention is really treating symptoms. So cough medicine addresses the cough, right? Suppresses the cough, doesn't treat the underlying cold virus. Okay. So our healthcare system is really focused on disease management, not really on healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about from a scale of like minus 100 to 0, our healthcare system is about playing in that area. When I think about like health, deep health, true health, whatever you want to call it, wellness, wellness has kind of gotten a little fuzzy in its definition, but I'm thinking about how we play in the 0 to 100. So when we talk about addressing root causes, that's where it's trying to stay in that 0 to 100.
Yes.
So all of these lifestyle protective things that we can do, it's not just about preventing cognitive decline. It's actually boosting our brain power. Like maybe that's the message is sleep. If you keep thinking about it from this place of I'm not getting enough sleep, that's actually in a lot of ways, we're still triggering a state of scarcity in our thinking. What if we could flip that and talk about, I love my brain, right? And I want to take good care of it. What can I do to help that, right? What can I do to take better care of my brain now that I know, right? And so, I can give it the opportunity to get like 8 solid hours of sleep. How would I feel? What would life look like if I did that? What a much more empowering, like uplifting way of thinking about sleep and going to bed earlier. Like I see those memes on Facebook where it's like, all the things that we didn't want to do when we were kids, when we get older are the things we want. We want to take a nap. We want to go to bed earlier, right? Like, I'm like, think about it that way. It's more like, I'm taking good care of it. So when we address root causes, we're intervening much earlier. We're addressing things before like the damage can be done. so to speak, right? Okay, so that's number 3 is addressing root causes. Number 4 is understanding like it's all connected. Like, so we really want to approach it holistically. And when we do that, like, actually there are multiple intervention points then. It's not just like one thing, right? I think this goes back to like allopathic medicine. And I'm not trying to slam Western medicine. I really think, our physicians are trained using an evidence-based approach. And the gold standard is randomized double-blind control studies. It's very hard to study lifestyle interventions. It just is very difficult to do. But at the same time, like when you look at where cancer is now versus years ago, right? When they talk about precision medicine and early detection and all that stuff, I truly believe that's where Alzheimer's is going to go. So if you notice any symptoms or signs, if there's any question, instead of trying to avoid it, like take a wait and see approach, I actually think like getting a diagnosis is actually really helpful. Because again, it's like you can start making some changes early that can potentially help your body actually repair itself so it can heal. So it reminds me of like, if you have a little kitchen fire, right? Like if it's just in the pan, you're able to like put it out, then maybe there's minimal damage. That's different from when your house is on fire.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all connected as the 4th one. And then the 5th one is use it or lose it, which we talked about. So energy management, restoring balance, addressing root causes, honoring the interconnection, and then use it or lose it.
I love it. Thank you for explaining and for putting this all together over time in your book, Thoughts Are Habits Too, and for taking the time to just really give us your understanding, your deep understanding of why this matters, of how this all works, and what we can do to help ourselves to have better brains, to have better sleep, to have better experiences in the day to day because we're taking care of ourselves and our future selves at the same time. Could you remind me what the name of your podcast is? Because you did mention that you talk about all these things on your podcast as well. So I wanted to let our followers know where they can find you on the podcast.
Sure. It's Happy and Healthy with Amy Lang.
Okay, wonderful. And then also, I know you are working specifically with clients in terms of optimizing brain health coaching. Could you describe a little bit more in detail what you're doing and how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you?
So as far as what I'm doing, I'm still doing habit coaching. At the end of the day, it is really habit coaching. We are focused, though, on the habits that are derived from those 5 principles that I talk about. So there's 5 principles, and there are like 8 essential protective factors. So oftentimes you hear about the risk factors. And I talked about that, right? The risk factors like type 2 diabetes and obesity, high blood pressure, chronic stress, depression is actually a risk factor. So the Lancet Commission actually published a report in July 2024, last summer, that identified 14 modifiable risk factors. There are more, like the list is growing. Like the Lancet Commission report didn't talk about chronic sleep deprivation or sleep disturbances, but I think the research is showing that is a concern. Chronic inflammation, poor oral health is one of those things. We know oral health is important for cardiovascular health. So I go back to it's all connected.
Yes.
I think we're talking about systemic inflammation, where it's not just your heart health, it ends up being your brain health as well. So so there's all these risk factors. I think of it as, in emergency situations, the instruction is instead of telling people what not to do, like don't panic, it's better to tell them what to do, stay calm. So I like talking in terms of protective factors. So from the principles, I have essential 8 protective factors. And from there, we come up with what are habits that make sense for you. So there's a lot of like precision habit making, I guess you would call it, where we're really looking at your particular life. How do we apply and integrate those principles into your life? So it's very evidence-based in that sense, but it's got that sort of East meets West kind of approach to it as well. So I am all about primary prevention and not treatments in that sense. So like right now, I have a 12-week coaching program. So that's the one where I'm trying to create a course from that. But I think it is applying and integrating those principles into your life through habits. So that, again, we're automating the things that are important. Right?
Terrific.
And really coming from this place of self-love. Like I always say, like, we don't want toxic fuel to drive us. We want it to be like from this place of self-love that's fueling our efforts.
Beautiful. And how can our followers stay in touch with you and or work with you?
So you can go follow me on Instagram at Habit Whisperer. I also actually started another account called at Amy Lang.to that's really focused on Alzheimer's prevention. Habit Whisperer kind of combines the weight loss and Alzheimer's. I think that the algorithm is maybe a little confused at this point. And then my website, there's amylangcoaching.com is one. And then moxie-club.com is the other one. So again, not to confuse things, Amy Lang Coaching, again, is focused very much on Alzheimer's prevention. Moxie-club.com is really about optimizing your brain health. So from a marketing messaging standpoint, it's like, which one do you want to focus on? Alzheimer's prevention and protecting your brain health or boosting your brain power? That's why they're 2 different websites.
Okay, but lots of ways to stay connected. They will all be listed in the show notes. And
Thank you.
Again, I want to give great thanks to Amy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I hope everybody like me tonight is going to run to bed. Thank you, Amy. It's been a delight. You're a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's been so fun.
All right, everyone. I will see you next week. Get some sleep, get some rest, do those early morning walks, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make Time for Success podcast. If you enjoyed what you've heard, you can subscribe to make sure you get notified of upcoming episodes. You can also visit our website, maketimeforsuccesspodcast.com, for past episodes, show notes, and all the resources we mention on the show. Feel free to connect with me over on Instagram too. You can find me there under the name Procrastination Coach. Send me a DM and let me know what your thoughts are about the episodes you've been listening to. And let me know any topics that you might like me to talk about on the show. I'd love to hear all about how you're making time for success. Talk to you soon.